I'd just say I'm glad to be here. Thank y'all. It is a little different up here with the lights and bright. I am Brian Jennings. My family and I moved here in 2018. I've got a wife, Cherise, who she actually worked for 1 year in Coosa Valley. She's got several years of elementary education experience. I've got 2 daughters who graduated from Pell City High School, and I've got 2 sons who will be at the high school in the fall. Just look forward to the opportunity to serve.
Awesome. Please describe the role of a local school board member as you understand it, and why are you the best person to fill this position?
So as I understand it, really the main job is hiring a superintendent and a chief financial officer and kind of working in an advisory capacity and accountability for them. Beyond that, I think it's important that you're present in the community, engaged with them. So, whether it's the teachers or the staff or the students that are in the schools or the community, parents, things, you're engaged with them, you know what they desire, you know what's going on, and you're able to represent their interest well. I think ultimately, if you're in the school board, you're in a position of public service. You're spending public money in the interest of the public. So you've got to set everything else that's important to you aside and do ultimately what's important for the kids. And if your decisions aren't based around what's important for the kids, serving their parents, serving the community at large, then I don't know why you're doing it.
What are the most significant issues our school district is currently facing, and how would you propose the district address these challenges?
Really, in thinking about this, there were 3 things that kind of came to mind. I think, honestly, over the past couple of years, I think one of our problems has just been unity. And I think it's important that we've got from the board down through the central office, to the administration at the schools, to the teachers on the ground, to the community, we've got to all pull together. And we've got to be pulling in the same direction. If we're going to fulfill the potential that's in the school system, the opportunity that we have, if we're going to provide for the kids their best opportunity to grow and learn and succeed, we've got to work together, and we've got to be all pulling in the same direction. So I think ultimately that's important. Several that other people mentioned, and I think it's important. We do have a new superintendent. We've got to empower him, and we've got to get behind him, and we've got to all work together. So I think that's job number 1. I think it is important that we think about how do we reach different groups of students. There's a lot of things that we can do that's going to help that student who's going to college. How do we prepare them? How do we help them succeed in getting in the school that they want to attend? Even beginning with one thing. So, I've got a daughter that goes to Auburn, and we engaged the All Pencils Down program to help her improve her ACT score. And one thing I noticed last year, the school did that, and they engaged, I think it was the 10th and 11th grade in that same program. So the more we can prepare them to get into the college they want to go to, and then have a challenging curriculum that prepares them for college and for success there, I think that's important. At the same time, we've got students who aren't going to go to college. And the reality is everybody's just not wired that way. Everybody's not built for college. But you can be a plumber, an electrician. There's a lot of trades out there that you can have a successful life following those trades. So how do we help those students prepare? I know that the ag program has been very successful. We've got a welding program and other trades. And I think the more we can invest in that, and the more we can give those students an opportunity to have the interview skills, the job skills that they need to succeed where they're going to go in the workforce, I think we've got to do that as well. And just figuring out how do we cater to every student as best we can. And then I think the last one is teachers. The most important thing we can do is attract and retain fantastic teachers. The teacher is probably the most important tool in our tool belt in making the school successful. So how do we reward successful teachers? How do we empower them to go out and take care of the kids? I think that's important. I think we've got to think about how do we create a teaching opportunity in Pell City that makes teachers say, hey, I desire to go work there. The reality is there's Trustful, Chelsea, there are numerous successful school systems that are fairly close to us, and that's who we're competing with for teachers. So how do we create a teaching opportunity that makes people say, I don't want to work there, I want to work in Pell City? And how do we keep them here once we get them here? I think that's something we've got to think about and brainstorm. How do we do that? I think those are the three biggest issues that I see.
The Alabama State Department of Education scored Pell City schools an 80 in 2022, an 81 in 2023, and an 83 in 2024. What are your thoughts on this trend and the trajectory of the school system overall?
I'm definitely excited to be moving in the right direction. I think the best way I think about this is to use an analogy. So again, I've got 4 children, and they've had varying degrees of academic success. And the reality is all of their potential and skills are different. I've got some kids I've got one daughter that if she had an 83 in math, I was excited. I've got a son who, if he had an 83 in math, we'd be having some real issues. And I think the important thing is, with all my kids, what Sharice and I tasked them with is, I need you to do your very, very best. And I need you to be as successful as your potential allows you to be. And I think we've got to think about the school system the same way. And I think Pell City has more potential than an 83. And so we've got to figure out, how do we make Pell City achieve the potential that it has? And I don't know that I can put a number on that, man. Like, man, we need to have a 93 or 95. But I know there's some pretty smart people working in the school system who can figure that out. We've got to work together, and we've got to get the school system there. I think we owe it to the children to give them their best opportunity for success.
Thank you. Do we have any follow-up questions from the committee, Mr. Jessup?
I do, Brian. You made
Yes, sir.
You were talking about how do we attract teachers.
Yes, sir.
And it sounded like you put a lot of thought in that. What is it? What are you? How do you attract? Is it just pay? What is? What could we do to attract?
I think that's the reality. Is part of pay is part of the table stakes. Now, do we have to be the highest paying school system? Not necessarily, but that's what gets you to the table. I think that can be pay. I think some of it is on the city council and the mayor, and how do we make a community that makes them want to live in. The reality is it's cheaper to live here than it is in some of the places we're competing with. So that doesn't necessarily require us to be the highest paid. But at the same time, I know one of the other questions that we're going to talk about or potentially talk about is, maintaining a positive atmosphere and some of that. I think a lot of that is, here's the reality. You want to work at a place that's fun and engaging. You want to like the people that you work for. So some of that is in the central office administration. How do we treat people fairly? How do we engage accountability? So I think there's a multitude of factors that go into that. And there's probably a lot of ideas that I haven't thought about. So that's the beauty of a school board and central office is you've got a group, and all those minds are going to have a different perspective. So if we put those perspectives together and we have an open mind and we learn from each other, I think we can figure that out.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Did anybody else have a follow-up question on those first 3? All right, how important is long-term strategic planning for a school system? And what key areas should Pell City schools prioritize such a plan?
I think long-term planning is crucial. Obviously, we want to have a successful 25-26 school year, but we've got to be thinking about 2030, 2040, and beyond. The reality is we're in a growing community, and that student population is growing. And so we've got to figure out how are we prepared for that 5 years from now and 10 years from now. And we've got to build a foundation now to prepare for that. Because if you try to do it at the last minute, it's not going to be what's best for the kids. It's not going to set them up to be success. So we've got to figure out how do we prepare for that. And that's, physical facilities, classrooms, desks, all those sorts of things. But there's a lot other beyond to it, class size and all that. So how do we prepare for a growing population? I think, technology is important. How are we setting up for success that the kids have access to the best technology they can have? I can tell you, some of y'all may not be old enough to remember this. I took typing in 9th grade on a typewriter. There was not very long after that was obsolete. But I did learn some typing skills and things that were applicable in the future. I took computer applications on an Apple IIe computer in the 10th grade. There's nothing where that paid off probably after the 10th grade. So how do we stay ahead of the game, and how do we plan for that technology and engage students in things that they're going to use in the future? And then I think the other one is just educational trends. I mean, I went to high school in 6 periods, and then we went to 7 periods. And then I didn't mention this, but I taught high school for several years. I taught on block schedule. And so the trends in education change. So how do we keep up with that? How do we stay on top of growing ourselves, personal development, growing the staff, growing the administration so they're prepared and they know all that's out there to again, it's all about how do we set the kids up for success.
Oh, I got a question. We got time?
Absolutely.
Am I butting in on anybody?
No.
You said you taught school.
I did, yes, sir. So I graduated from Auburn with honors with a degree in secondary education. I taught, so I actually coached at Auburn High School for 2 years while I was finishing school. I taught in Chambers County, Alabama for 3 years. I taught in Newnan, Georgia for 2 years.
All right, wait a minute. I want to
Yes,
get
sir.
out from the weeds. I don't want you to take up my time with that.
I apologize, go ahead.
The legislature just passed a thing. You talking about technology. You hit on workforce development, which is important, and special needs we've talked about. But technology, and now in Alabama, a kid can't have his cell phone at school. What's your take on that? How's that going to be implemented?
I have 4 kids, and the cell phone is a constant distraction. So I think, I'll be honest, I don't know what all the laws are and all that, but
But you were a teacher.
I was a teacher, yes, sir. I was a teacher before cell phones were an issue. But it was, I think that can be a tool, but it's often more of a distraction than a tool. So, some of that, maybe you have to figure out a policy where we can take advantage of both sides of that. We can set it aside when it is a distraction, but when it's an opportunity to be a tool, that we use it.
All right, if you want to do a closing statement, Mr. Jennings.
I guess the only thing I would say is just something I think we've all got to think about is how do we communicate to the kids that they're valuable and we think they have potential? And I think that's through actions. Our words are useless if they're not tied to actions. And so what we do, we've got to think about how does that communicate to the kids? Hey, we think you're valuable. We think you've got a lot of potential. And we care about you enough to help you fulfill that potential.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank y'all for having me.